Been waiting weeks for this to happen right here. Pretty amazing stuff. Who would have thought 2 little cheap bulbs would make you so happy? But it does. So I'm in the Jeep in the dark because I've been working on the circuit board on the dashboard here. My amp light and the oil light do not work, or did not work. Haven't worked since I got the thing. I cleaned the circuit board contacts on the back. I cleaned some of the contacts on the connector back here. I don't know if you can see this in the dark, but it's back here. That yellow guy back there, or gray guy. Nothing. I tried grounding the other end of the amp light circuit to the battery, which should complete the circuit and light the bulb. Still nothing. Earlier tonight, I was cleaning the contacts again out of desperation and came across a crack in the power feed between pin K and pin, I believe, H that go down to the amp light, and then G, I think, that goes to the oil light. And now I have 2 lights. Amazing. So I'm very excited. I've been chasing this literally since I got the Jeep, and it is now resolved, at least temporarily. Since there is still a break in the contact there on the circuit board, I'm going to have to either create some kind of semi-permanent solution. Right now there's just a little piece of steel wire bridging the gap and being held down by the bulb socket for the oil pressure light. That's not a good fix, and it does seem like since the amp circuit, or the circuit for the bulb, is an integral part of exciting the alternator and making it work, that's a pretty big part of making the car run and drive. So yeah, quick update in the dark. Yeah, super excited. Okay, so as you saw in the intro, the instrument cluster now has power to the amp and oil pressure lights, something that hasn't worked since I've gotten the Jeep, and something I've been trying to diagnose. Obviously, you need to know if you have oil pressure, and you also need to know if your alternator is charging. I did also, in researching this, find out that the alternator circuit is, or at least the amp light circuit, does play some part in making the charging system work by sending 12 volts to the alternator and exciting it, the field there. So as you can see in the video, it now works, but what happened? How did I get to that point? How did I diagnose it? So in looking at the wiring diagrams and a mix of that and reading piles and piles of posts online from people that have had similar issues, from what I can tell, the pin H, which should be this pin, goes over to the amp light, which is this one here. And you can see, first thing I did was clean these contacts, because you can see they're kind of grungy. You can kind of see here what they used to look like, very oxidized, and they were getting no continuity. So I cleaned the pins on the board here, and I also cleaned the contacts for the bulbs. But I now have continuity. You can see my black lead here. I'm just touching my multimeters in continuity mode, and I'm just checking the pins. And I did the same for the oil pressure light. So I knew that my pins at least had continuity to one side of the bulb socket. Now obviously for the bulb to light, you have to complete the circuit, so it has to find a ground or a power depending on what side is missing. From what I can tell, power comes into the board, ignition power comes into the board on pin K, which I believe is this one. And if we know that these sides of the sockets are one side of the circuit, whether it's ground or power, then the other side must be either a ground or a power. In this case, since we know power is coming in on pin K, I do know that these two are actually grounding. So power is going from the ignition to pin K, through the socket, and then coming out to ground on these two pins. So this one grounds at the alternator, completing the circuit, lighting the light. This one grounds at the oil pressure light, again completing the circuit and grounding, lighting the light. When pressure builds, it lifts the ground, light goes out, and the same here. As voltage surpasses battery voltage coming into the board, it will actually turn the light out. But if I look at the trace, I can follow it down, and it goes over to here. And then if I look down here, I can see there's another trace that connects these two sockets. So if I check continuity between them, they are indeed connected. We know this is the ground side since this goes through the pin, so this must be the power side. Okay, power comes from pin K, and we know it has to get to this side. Well, nothing on the oil pressure light. So something is wrong with the power side. I can see the trace going down right here, and it goes to this bottom piece, which then connects over to here, which is intact. So something is wrong between this socket and this pin. Now the board, at this point, the board is still pretty grungy, but if you look closely, I sandpapered the life out of this thing to get it nice and shiny, but in doing so I uncovered this. It's very hard to see, but it's this little bitty, well, the black line right here where the probe is pointing. This is actually a break in the copper contact, so it runs around right here, jumps across over to this side, and then comes over here. So let's test that. It's easy enough. Let's see, do I have my power here? And I do. So pin K is going from here to here, and it's supposed to connect all the way over to the amp light socket. So the amp and oil pressure lights share a power, and they each ground through their respective pins. Okay, so we know what the problem is. How do we fix it? I believe the best way to do this would be to actually try to bridge it with some solder and make it smooth. This is where the bulb actually hooks in. So you see these little contacts on the bulb. These actually touch this copper and complete the circuit. So whatever goes here has to be relatively smooth, or else it's just going to get peeled up or ripped up by the bulb socket, or damage the socket, or bulb holder rather. So I think ideally you'd want to solder something across this, if it would even stick to that. I don't know, there's no copper there. And this was covered in green crusty corrosion, so I have a feeling it's just been eaten away. I mean, maybe solder a wire across it. I don't own a soldering iron yet. I'm gonna have to get one. But what I did, this little tiny piece of wire, you know, it's Christmas time, we're all hanging ornaments on the trees, and we have these little wire hangers all over the house. They're everywhere. And I actually stepped on this one the night I was working on it, and it stabbed into my foot. So I had it sitting on the countertop while working on the board, and it occurred to me, well, why not try using that to bridge the connection? So the bulb goes in here. Let's see if I can do this on camera without... It's very finicky to get it to go in there. But the idea is that if you pinch this under the bulb holder, it's already got some tension on it anyway because of the metal, and the clasp on the socket pulls it tight against the contacts. So it will hold that in place. Obviously it works. You saw the video at the beginning. So now I started doing this. So this is more or less confirmation that that actually does complete the circuit. If you go, and again, we're going from power pin, which runs down through the oil pressure light socket, across this trace down here, over to here, and back to the power side of the amp light. So again, we have continuity back where we started. We know that because we tested that. We also have it at the other side of the oil pressure light, and again we have it over here at our amp light. So that's it. Again, this is not at all a permanent fix, and you can kind of see the little guy down there. It's just that little piece of wire bridging the gap being held down by the pressure on this socket. I will have to eventually learn how to solder this correctly. I don't know much about soldering. I have no idea. That seems like it should be a simple repair, but I'm not going to risk damaging the board to repair it, so worst case I'll figure out some way to secure that better if I have to go this route. But it works for now, and it's given me confidence that the circuit is now good, and makes me feel good about replacing the alternator, which I now know is not charging. That was a big concern of mine, replacing an alternator that was not defective, but rather just was not exciting and generating current or electricity because the circuit wasn't exciting it. This was really exciting for me to figure this out, not only to get the board working, but also to know that when it's installed in the Jeep, everything works the way it's supposed to, and I don't have to keep chasing wires in that cluster, or in the connector for the cluster that plugs in over here. I still don't know about the gauges, the temperature gauge and fuel gauge. I have not tested those yet. I believe the voltage regulator works. At least it has continuity in all the pins, the ground and the power, and everything do have continuity there. And I did also confirm that, using the same process, confirm that all the powers and grounds on all the rest of the sockets do work. So the high beam light, the two dash lights here, and the turn signal sockets at the far ends, and then of course the two that we've been talking about, the amp and oil lights. But yeah, that is pretty much it. So if you want to know the I guess my way of doing the wrong thing to make the board work, then this is kind of it. But it seems to be working, and I'm really happy that it's at least solid enough that I can continue testing. I have a feeling if I hit a bump or two, this is going to fall out and not work anymore, but Jeep's got to be running and driving before that can happen, so motivation to get that done too. Next up is going to be the alternator. For the price of the regulator and the price of the replacement alternator, I can just buy the upgrade, or what is supposed to be an upgrade, the Delco 10SI. I think a 63 or 65 amp. So I'll do a video on that as well, kind of let you guys have a laugh at me muddling through that. And yeah, hope you found this informative, or entertaining if nothing else, or makes you angry if you're a pro looking at this because I'm doing it wrong. Either way, I appreciate you watching, and stay tuned for more updates and content. Thanks.